Welcome to the Primitive Lifeways channel. Back in traditional times, the making of pottery was one of the most important cultural resources that Native people made. In this video series, we're going to take you step by step in how to find clay, making a pot, and then eventually firing it. So stick around, we got a great series coming up. All right, folks, so I want to welcome you back. Now, what I'm sitting on right now is a residual clay source, and this is some of the best clay that you can find out in Yavapai County. In fact, hundreds of years ago, the Yavapai natives that occupied the lands far before we got here would use clay sources very similar to this to make their traditional pots. They would use traditional tools such as oyas to fill up clay with. They would use baskets, and they would use antler tines from elk and mule deer. We're going to use more modern tools, such as this bucket here, and then a small trough to dig through some of this clay. So what I want to do is I want to hand over this video to an extraordinarily talented potter, Kiowa Sage. He's going to show you how to break up this clay, what you're looking for, and he'll explain more about this residual clay source.
So as Jeff mentioned, this is our residual clay source. And these types of clay sources were utilized for hundreds of years by the Prescott culture and other various local indigenous groups in the area. And what a residual clay source is essentially a clay that's still in contact with the region's geology. And what that means is a region has a very specific type of geology, and over a long period of time, rocks from that geology, whether it be granite or phyllite, which this clay source is from, they will start to erode and over millions and millions of years form into a clay in the earth. And so once these clays are formed, it's already packed with the natural geology of the region. So these clays are pretty advantageous because you can just gather them from the earth and then sift it out either with a wetting process or a dry sifting process as well. So as the clay comes out of the earth, typically it'll come out in a blocky or chunky type structure. And so in digging it, I like to reach my tool into the cracks that are already within the clay bed and dig it into that empty space, because as the clay dries, it hard packs, and then just lift out large chunks from there. And this clay is still pretty wet because or damp more or less. It rained recently, so that's pretty another advantageous thing to watch out for, is after it rains it's always good to dig clay because it's a lot less work than when it's dry. And as you dig, you'll notice you'll find roots and all different things. It's just the nature of a residual clay source, but all this will be sifted out and processed later on. So we're just going to gather this here, continue to dig, find good places in the wall here to dig at, like right down here in this wall here. And it's important too to brush away the top surface. There's just too many organics in this part right there, but if you can find a spot in here and dig in. It's a pretty tough spot to dig, but so I'm just going to continue to dig this clay, and then we're going to go back to our camp and process it down into a workable clay body. We just gathered our clay, and now we're going to start processing it down. As you see, we have these clay clods here that need to be broken down into a smaller particle size. So I have my mono here, and I have my flat stone. It's pretty much all you need to process your clay. And we're just going to lightly pound it down and then start bringing larger pieces in here and pounding it. You're more or less lightly tapping it to separate the clay from any of the larger rocks or organic materials, because you don't want to crush up too many of the larger rocks in with your clay, otherwise you're going to be getting too much temper to your clay. So you just want to separate the clay from the organics and takes just a light pounding, and this step is traditionally called tunking by the Paiute natives in Southern California. And the Paiute natives are actually relatives to the Yavapai natives in the Prescott culture, who are their descendants. But the Paiute split off and went into California some years ago. So this is the traditional dry processing method. Right now I'm just finding some of the larger rocks that's separated from the clay and throwing them out. It's a rock right there. If you hit it and it just doesn't break, it's typically just a rock. That was clay. So I don't want to go too much farther than this. This is about right for how large you want your clay to be at the end of it. So here we go. I have it right here. Now the next step is going to be to sift this and sift out all the excess temper. Now traditionally, it's hypothesized that many of these cultures used different types of woven yucca sifter baskets to sift out their pottery clay, which probably isn't too far off from the truth, personally, in my opinion. I brought this second container over here, another bucket to put your clay in. For the sake of what we're doing right now, I'm just going to be using a common kitchen strainer, common kitchen sifter, I guess. That works just fine with processing the stuff. So here we have our sorted residual clay, and now we're going to start adding water and wedging this into a mass. So now that I've hydrated my clay, it's now time to wedge it. And the purpose of wedging your clay is to homogenize it, so to get all the moisture content throughout all the particles and just to work it in to a better clay body. And sometimes wedging will take up to about 2 hours to fully wedge your clay body. So it is kind of a lot of work, but it's well worth it in the end, because you do get a good clay body after wedging your clay for a while. You notice when you're wedging, you get these two palm prints in here, that kind of formation, because you're Constantly wedging it, almost in a spiral formation. And we're getting at all the air pockets to ensure that the clay, when it dries, won't crack, or during the firing won't blow up because of residual air that's existent within the clay body. You know you're working with good clay when it smells like rain. It's called petrichor. It's the scent of rain on dry earth. That's what good clay smells like. You can smell it from here. It's a really good smell. Anyone who lives in the southwest or desert regions know that smell very well after the monsoon rains. Now that I've wedged my clay, I'm now ready to store it for 2 to 3 weeks in a hermetically sealed container, and that can be either a Ziploc bag or a large mason jar. And aging is important when working with clay because as the clay ages and it sits there for about 2 to 3 weeks, it builds up bacteria and enzymes that break down the particle size, furthering the wetting process of the clay body, therefore making the clay body more workable and plastic as a result.